Welcome to Prime Time, a show for adults in the prime of life. I'm Susan Hoskins, the Executive Director of the Princeton Senior Resource Center. We provide programs and services for older adults and their family caregivers. Today, our topic is hoarding. My guests are Jan McCurdy from Senior Care Management.
Hi, Susan.
And Margit Novack.
Margit Novack.
From Moving Solutions. Welcome, both of you. First, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do professionally, and we will have contact information up at the end of the show.
Well, I run a company that's called Senior Care Management, and we've been in business for about 20 years. We provide advice and ongoing help to seniors who, either by some diminishment in their mental abilities or in their physical abilities, need someone to help, a professional someone, help them both organize services and then get to the physician and coordinate their medications and get the meals in and go to the grocery store and all the things that it takes to coordinate living at home.
I think sometimes of care managers as people who substitute for the adult children, particularly when those adult children live at a distance.
We often use that phrase, professional children.
Yeah.
And then we also do home care. We have a professional home care company.
Great. And you have home activity people now.
And we do. Thanks for remembering that. We have people who just go to activities with people, to the museum, to the coffee shop,
to our place,
to your place, and that's been a good new service.
And Margit.
My company is Moving Solutions, and we work exclusively with seniors and help them deal with their stuff. Many of our clients are moving, but some are not moving, but they all have decades of accumulations and are trying to figure out how to make their environment work for them. Sometimes it's about downsizing to a new home, sometimes it's about staying in their current home, or how to figure out how to get their home ready to go on the market.
That's great. One of the reasons I asked both of you to come today is there are all these shows on television now about hoarding, and more people are talking about it. And I think it's something that all three of us have known and seen professionally for some time and are helping clients work with. And so I thought we might bring that home to our community and talk about hoarding and what it is. So what is hoarding, and how is hoarding different from just being a collector or a saver?
Well, I think that's a good question. And I think a lot of people who do save or collect may wonder, does that mean that they're a hoarder? Hoarding has three characteristics. One of them is value. Hoarding is the accumulation of things that appear to have little or no value. Another characteristic of hoarding deals with the quantity of stuff. Hoarding means that there is such a quantity of things that it interferes with function. That means that you can't use the bathtub because it's being used for storage. You can't sit in your living room because every horizontal surface is being used with piles of things on them. And the third characteristic of hoarding deals with hazard or risk. Hoarders have such a degree of things that they actually pose a risk to the person who hoards and sometimes to other people around them. So let's look at collecting. Many people who collect things that have value, but some people collect things that don't have a lot of material value. But that doesn't mean that they're a hoarder, because most collectors and savers don't collect to such a degree that they can't use their house. And
they don't collect one kind of thing and they can let go of other things very easily. Whereas I think a lot of the hoarders that I've known, there's very little that they would consider not of value.
They
the
keep almost everything.
Foil, the rubber bands,
the junk mail.
I walked into one, stacks and stacks and stacks of egg cartons.
Which have a use in their mind. And most collectors and savers don't collect to such a degree that it becomes a risk. So I think that all hoarders are collectors and savers, but all collectors and savers are not hoarders.
Good point.
True. And there has to be some significant impairment in life. There has to be it's either affecting their work, or it's affecting their ability to take care of themselves, or to eat, or to do some...
You can't bathe because the bathroom's full of stuff. You can't cook because the kitchen's covered with stuff. You can't sleep in your bed because the bed is covered with stuff.
I think one big characteristic of hoarding also is that it's very private. It generally deals with someone's home. So probably you and I and almost everyone knows people who hoard, but it's very personal. It's
And
in
we
their
would
home.
never know it if we work with
That's
them
right.
or we only see
And
them in our office.
That's a wonderfully good point, is that there are people who are very functional on the outside, who go to work, who do things, and yet they don't let people into their home.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that also makes me think that there's some level of awareness. You know,
There's-
if you don't, I mean, many of the people that I've known don't want me to come visit them
There's
at
a
home.
level of
There's some
shame
shame
and-
about it, but it's not universal. Sort of depending on what level of self-awareness there is. But some people, you know, are aware and don't want other people to come in. So, Jan, why don't you talk a little bit about what causes hoarding and how people come to be hoarders?
Well, and maybe a little bit about how prevalent it is, because
Yes.
I think everybody goes, after they watch a show on hoarding or they see a picture of a house that's horrible, they say, oh my goodness, am I a hoarder?
Okay.
And it's really not a huge percentage of the population. I mean, we're talking about maybe 2 to 5% of the entire population. I do think it gets higher when we're talking about older people, but that's kind of a different kind of hoarding. We're talking maybe 10 to 15%, we're not sure. But the causes of hoarding, there's a high correlation with obsessive compulsive disorder. Something like 15% of obsessive compulsive patients report hoarding. So that's a high correlation, but it's no longer considered just part of obsessive compulsive disorder. It's becoming its own diagnosis, and that's very interesting. And I don't know where that will go. I don't know what it is. I do know instinctively, and I think we all feel it's different than obsessive compulsive disorder. It's its own thing, you know.
One of the trainings I went to on it also talked about a high correlation with ADHD or ADD.
Oh, that's very interesting.
With the feeling that a person who has attention deficit disorder often has a really hard time sorting. So you talked about the mail earlier, bringing in the mail, and then that thing that we're all encouraged to do, immediately sort it into 3 piles. This is trash, this is something I need to open and look at, and this is a bill, it's something I need to take care of. And that either they get distracted in that process, oh, but this has a really interesting picture on it, let me see what's here, or that decision-making process, which I think we also run into with dementia.
With cognitive,
of how
with
do
cognitive
I,
deficits, for
how
sure.
do I sort? How do I know if this is important? And so the distraction level being one, but that
I think that
inability to sort.
I think
being
that
another
decision
factor.
making is a key issue. I know we have had clients, and I would walk in and immediately see there are 4 or 5 different categories of belongings. But to the client, everything seems unique. There could be a lot of black hangers, but they might see, well, there's a metal hanger, there's a plastic hanger, this hanger has cardboard, and every single thing needs to have its unique category, which keeps them from getting organized. So the difficulty in even seeing categories is one
that's
of
a
the
very
things.
good point. That's a
I
very
think.
good point.
And that running in families where we're not really sure, again, if that's nature or nurture. Is it because I
We're
always
fascinated
grew up
with
in,
that,
in a house full of stuff, and my, you know, I'm used to this is what I think is normal,
there's also
or
the-
is it something biologic, again, in how our brains make
The
decisions?
brains are
and we really don't know, do we?
We don't know.
No.
And you see children of so-called hoarders who are neat as a pin as a reaction to
Yeah.
what they grew up in.
Yeah.
They're so ashamed.
Or you can see 2 siblings, and one of the children of the hoarder is a hoarder, and the other one is very neat.
Right.
And they grew up in the same household.
So what are some of the other kinds of things that might contribute to hoarding, particularly in older adults?
Well, we have to talk about cognitive deficits for sure, because as you begin to have some problems with thinking, particularly that executive function where we're talking about decision making, as Margit said, when you can't decide, what is this explanation of benefits from Medicare important? Should I save it? Should I think about it later? Is this an old bill? Do I save old bills? Did I pay this bill? I better just put it in a pile. This medication, is it an old medication? Is it a new medication? Maybe I'll just save it. And it just accumulates. So I think that's part of the dementia phenomenon. I don't know if you see other aspects to dementia when you're working with people and trying to clean out a house, but I see this sort of, I just can't decide what to do with the stuff, so I'll keep it. It's safer.
The other one I find is on the shopping end. I can't remember if I bought toilet paper and it's on
goodness.
sale. So
I
there's
just-
two factors going on
I
here.
just flashed a picture of a whole cupboard of green beans. I mean,
Right.
Well, you know, it's not that they can't remember it. The hoarding house is so cluttered, they
can't
don't
find
know
it.
what's there.
You can't
And things
find
are
it.
not grouped, so they have no idea if they already have
That's-
something, so they better buy more.
And that's an excellent point, because you'll find when you're sorting out a house, 10 hammers or 10 kinds of the
In
same
8 different
cereal in 8
places.
different
Right.
places. So it is really hard, which must be delightful when you go in and start to sort out and they go, oh my goodness, I have so many of those.
Right.
That must be kind of fun. Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that I've seen with organizers too, is that trying to pull things together. Like, okay, this is in the bathroom, this is the shelf, here's the bin where the toothpaste goes. So before we buy toothpaste again, we're going to look in this bin. And that's a really foreign concept to some people who have lived in that kind of chaotic and disordered environment for a long time. I find a lot of the videos and a lot of the individuals I've worked with, it's kind of sad. It's you kind of wonder how people have found ways to function
Well, that's
in the chaos.
That's
and
definitely you know, I've walked into houses and said, it's a miracle. How did they survive for so long? How did they do it? It's really says something about the human's
tribute.
ability to function. You know, there's no place to cook. There's barely any place to sleep.
I think
did
one
they
of the
do it?
biggest costs, though, and I think that the people who hoard will admit this, is the cost of socialization,
Yeah,
that
very
they
good
are
point.
cut off from people. We talked about being ashamed, embarrassed to have people in the home. They don't have, I have been into a number of homes where the client has said to me, no one has been inside for years.
Yeah.
And they're very cut off. I had one elderly client who did a great deal of mail orders. And when we talked about stopping that behavior, she said, I don't drive. The UPS man is my friend. If I stop buying, I'll be lonely.
I think we have to say the internet has augmented hoarding in a big way.
Yes, it's made it very, very easy
It's
to
made
acquire.
it really easy, as
Yeah.
have catalogs.
Yeah.
But we've also seen people for whom the things replace the people. They've lost a spouse, the children are grown,
Well, loss is certainly a big,
and
big,
that
big,
loss
big part
seems
of
to
it.
be a connecting factor, particularly for older adults.
And then we're talking about depression, too.
Mhm.
Certainly depression accompanies dementia, I think, in a high percentage of cases. And when you're depressed, the get up and go is not there. And it does take get up and go to stay organized.
And another thing that I've seen is people whose abilities have declined, so that, for example, they've made a really big commitment to recycling.
Yeah.
You know I shouldn't
know I
throw
should
out
do
these
it.
bottles,
Right.
and so I'm going to put them here in the corner, but I don't have the capacity anymore to walk to the corner where the recycling barrel is on the right day to put them out. And so that corner of recycling stuff just builds and builds.
And having just been on crutches, can I tell you, if your physical energy and abilities are limited, things can accumulate really quickly.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think if you're frail, I'm trying to live. I can't worry about straightening things out. And eventually that just gets to the point where you just can't do it if you don't have other people to help all the time.
I see this a lot in our business, and I call them the accidental hoarder. These are individuals who didn't used to have a hoarding environment, and it may be because they became frail. It may be because they're a caregiver for someone else and they're completely occupied 24/7 just taking care of someone. And the house starts to get away from them. Or they're physically frail and they can't handle it, so it starts to get away. But with stuff, the more it starts to accumulate, the more clutter grows, then it becomes more and more overwhelming. So it becomes like a snowball, and people can't figure out how to get out of that situation. They wouldn't choose to live that way, but they also don't know what to do once it gets to be a certain degree.
But
And time and
insurmountable.
energy is
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
used up that
Well, you talked about the mail, and so if we just use that as a metaphor for all of the stuff that comes in our lives, but you know, it's one thing to go through one day's worth of mail. When it's piled up for a week, the pile is so much bigger. When it's piled up for 6 months, it's huge, and it just feels so daunting.
I think
that
about
you-
when I come home from
how do you
vacation
start?
and I look
Yeah.
at that pile of mail and the newspapers, like, ah.
Well, you know, it is daunting, but the
Yeah.
good news is that to me, in my experience, the accidental hoarder would like to get help.
I think you're
And
right.
they would
absolutely.
like to feel more in control of their environment.
Yeah.
And I hope that these individuals will reach out because they don't have to be victim to their environment. They can get control again over their environment.
And I
So
think
there
we
are people like all three of us who help people. Either we do it, we have volunteers who do it, we know, I refer to both of you to
Yep.
bring in the help.
And I
to
think we
clear
should
that
talk about approach too, because there may be families who are wondering, how do I approach somebody who's a hoarder?
How can families help?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's tough. And I think one of the things we've learned through experience is be careful not to say anything when you first walk in the house. You have to control your own instinctual kinds of feelings about what you see. And that's true for families too, because regardless of the reason for the hoarding, the person is going to feel worse about fixing it if you come in a judgmental way. You have to just
And a lot of adult children
force
make that
yourself.
mistake.
Yeah, I
don't they?
think you're
I do
absolutely
too.
right.
I think so too.
Mom, you
you're
got to
right.
do
yeah,
something.
I've got to clean this up. You just have to
And that just-
somehow walk in. You know, I recently walked into someone's home. She had forewarned me, it's a mess. And it was a little worse than she had described it. And there were a few other things that I wish hadn't been there. I wish her sheets had been changed in the last couple of months, and I wish the medications had been sorted out. But I had to just bite my tongue so as not to make her feel worse about it. You just have to go in, sit down and say, what do you want me to do?
You know,
I think
that's critical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finding
Where
out
do
what the
you want-
person's objective is, not what your objective is. Even if you would like to increase safety by making sure that there are aisles, gaining trust of the hoarder is really important. So saying what is your priority is really, really important.
Even when your whole body just wants to start,
That's right.
go out and get the bag of garbage bags and put stuff in, you just have to refrain. It's tough. It takes a lot
It
of
takes
discipline.
time too.
It
Goals are progress is slow.
Yeah,
for the
that's a
hoarder.
really good point. You have to be cautious and slow and respectful, and that's tough.
So
When
it sounds like all three of us are agreeing that the first two tips that we would give family members are, number one, not to ask the person what
Control
their
your
priority
feelings,
is,
yeah.
right? So to slow things down. So number one, what would you like to start with? And number two, pick little tiny goals. It might be that first day, that first week, all you do is go through the week's mail, or, you know, and if you don't succeed at the task, make the task smaller.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. A lot of people who live in hoarding situations have felt out of control and unsuccessful about handling this. So by giving a small task that they can succeed at, we're helping build their self-esteem that they can start to get a handle on this.
So this week we did this shelf, next week we did this shelf, and a month later you can say, wow, we did that whole bookcase.
That's right. That's
And
right.
you have to make it important. You have
Yeah.
to respect the importance that they attribute to it, and you have to agree.
So when you pick up this little tchotchke, and it looks like it's just a plastic thing that somebody picked up on a trip or something, and it looks so unimportant to you, if the person you're trying to help says, oh, but that's really important because I got it on our honeymoon.
And we all have those tchotchkes. You know, if you've shown somebody who's never been in your house, this is my shell that I got when I was on vacation. You know, you can tell it's not the same value to someone else objectively looking at your things, but it is to you.
You know,
And we all have that.
I think it's also helpful to have a good solution for the things that are leaving their home. Hoarders are fabulous
really-
recyclers. They want to know that things are not going to just be put in a trash can. So if you can have creative solutions for what to do with their belongings, you're increasing the likelihood that they're going to be receptive to your suggestions.
You know, I had some siblings whose house we had to clean out, and I remember we said to the one, all of your clothes went to somebody who outfits extras in movies. And she was so excited about it. And it was true. I mean, she was so excited about that because they weren't just going in the
Mhm.
garbage. They were actually going to be used somewhere. Yeah, I think you're so right.
Or
Purpose.
saying we're going to get all of this paper is going to be recycled can make a
Absolutely.
difference. And often they plan to get it to recycling, but procrastination is a major characteristic for a lot of hoarders. So I'm going to get that chair fixed. I'm going to get to recycling. So if you can provide those solutions, you may have some more receptivity.
Another one of the, and I think this fits with your accidental hoarders, but one of the other situations I've run into is the family recipients. So she has all of her family's heirlooms, and he has all of his family's heirlooms, and particularly if the death of the parent hasn't been resolved smoothly. But when you just end up, we've got to go down, we've got to empty Mom's house over the weekend, we're going to bring it all back and put it in the garage. Then needing to go through that and decide what's important. And I've just found that some people have a hard time because there's that
Emotional attachment. Yeah.
This represents my family. And one of the strategies I heard was in looking at, okay, all of these things represent your mother. Let's choose the 4 or 5 that are most important to you so that we can let go of the other 437.
That's a good point, because we all really attribute a lot of emotion to objects in our homes. I mean, that's just a fact. We do.
Well, it's funny because I also hear this a lot. And I've often thought about my own kids. I can't imagine what things that I own they would feel they had to keep to remember me. And yet maybe it's when you get to be a certain age,
I think that's so true.
You're looking at something that you need to represent them.
I remember dividing my mom's estate. My sisters and I all wanted the same tea kettle. I have no idea why. So we bartered and kind of, negotiated for different things, but it was just her tea kettle. You just never know.
My son took an electric donut maker from my grandmother because it was the one thing he remembered about her. Was when we went to visit her, she'd mix up the batter and make fresh donuts for him, and that donut maker now sits in my kitchen.
That's funny.
So I think, let me go on to another question, which is sometimes people go, well, can't anybody make these people change?
Well, we have to talk about, who are the people that we can actually help. There are certain people who are very competent, and they live in a situation that we might not think is particularly safe, but they have a right to do that. So if they're not at risk, that is a real clear danger to themselves or others, and they're capable, nobody can intervene.
The issue of putting yourself at risk, and I've talked to a number of individuals who have said, well, they're putting, they could fall, or they can't find their medication.
And I'm not talking about
Can't
that
we
kind
get-
of risk.
Well,
yeah.
but can't we get involved?
Yeah.
And the interesting part, we talked about competence. We all put ourselves at risk, and we want to be
Absolutely.
in control of our lives. We may avoid getting a mammogram. We may drive
too
after
fast.
we've
Yeah,
too fast, or
sure.
after we've been drinking, or talk on the phone while we're driving. So we're all putting ourselves at risk and wanting to be in control of our right to do that. It becomes interesting that often for older adults, we're ready to intervene and say, you don't have the right to put yourself at risk. And I think there are many very competent elderly adults who are saying, why did I lose that right? Because I got older.
And you don't. I mean, it's really only if you're interfering with someone else's ability to live safely in an apartment building. When the health department comes in and says, it must be cleaned,
So when you're living in a rental situation,
Congregate living,
then
absolutely.
the landlord has the right to say, you can't do this. And especially if it involves bugs, vermin that can, or a fire risk that could
Your
impact
sidewalk
the other.
is in such bad situation because everything overflows from your house and you don't take care of the shoveling.
Right.
But I
and
will
the health
be-
department can get involved
They can.
around issues around the outside, a swimming pool that isn't taken care of, or a sidewalk. But what goes on inside the house is considered, in this country, your
And-
personal right.
Think about it. we're not very tolerant of hoarders. We actually, a lot of people say,
Very
oh, it's disgusting, they shouldn't be able to live that way, it's a fire
You're right,
hazard.
you're absolutely
But we
right.
allow people to smoke. And certainly more fires have been started by people who smoke in their homes than by hoarding situations.
yeah.
So it's an interesting situation where we don't tolerate hoarding behavior very much.
I think that's true. I mean, if we're talking low capacity, somebody who's really impaired either by mental illness or dementia, you have to intervene because they need possibly up to guardianship or conservatorship. They need someone else to take care. But that capacity has to be really established, that they really aren't able to make decisions. And then you can intervene. And there's a whole process for intervening and for someone else taking control. But we all discuss with children, that's the way they choose to live. I mean, I have clients now who you cannot walk through the aisles. And, you know, many people on my staff would love to clean up the house, but we can't. It's their house.
Sometimes I think you can do things like say, you know, if you want me to keep visiting, there needs to be a chair I can sit on.
And those
Or
are people who
you can-
who have some capacity to change and to listen. And
But look at what you've identified here. One, you've addressed the fact that the person is likely to be lonely. So having someone visit, even if it's to help them not be a hoarder, is a real value to them. You've also let them set a goal. You've defined a very narrow goal. I need to be able to sit on a chair. You haven't said we have to clean out the apartment.
Right.
You've said I need to be able to sit on a chair.
It may be a very circuitous route to get to the chair, but
That's right.
there will be a place.
And the relationship is what is, in all cases, is what makes
right.
the difference. You start to develop a relationship, and then because they value the relationship, you can clean off a chair.
We
Maybe
work
you
with
can clean off the space around the chair.
We work with a client who was what I call a proud hoarder. She understood what she was doing and was not inclined to change. Our organizer was very candid that I can't keep coming here. I don't want to charge you and not accomplish something. And she started letting things go in order to maintain the relationship. And so it's interesting that it can come back to human relationships, the one thing that is cut off by a lot of hoarding.
Right, or as we would
is-
say, the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
It's totally how you get people
So
to
I
change.
hope out of this we've given people some ideas about hoarding in a way that's not sensational. I think some of the shows are kind of voyeuristic and
They are.
sensational.
They are.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
I agree.
Ways that we can be respectful of people's autonomy and self-determination, but also help them to move towards a situation that's a little safer
I hope
for
so.
them. We will have some resources up at the end of the show. I thank both of you so much
Oh, you're very
for
welcome.
coming in to start this conversation today.